Yo, what is up, guys? It's Underrated Major. Today I'm be doing a video discussing Igneel alive. Now I know there's already a lot of people with their pitchforks, and there's also a lot of people who already dislike and left the video. They're like, all right, this is bullshit. I'm not even going to entertain this. Underrated Major, you gone too far. I don't even want to listen to what you're about to say. But I'm not gonna be doing some crazy theory about Igneel being alive in some third dimension, like him coming back. No, no, no. I'm not gonna do a theory like that. It's not happening. No, I do not think that Igneel is alive. He's dead. He's 100% dead. He was gonna die regardless. Either if he came out of Natsu's body, he was gonna die anyway because they didn't have enough spirit. And then two, he was already dead basically. Like Aknologia them, like he already did the job. But I want to do a little not even speculation, just like a little discussion, a little fan theory about what would happen if Igneel actually survived. Now, let's just imagine, let's just take him for granted that Igneel and them didn't actually go inside of Natsu and them. Or let's just say that when they did go inside Natsu, that if they came out, they wouldn't die. So, let's just take away that stigma on how all the dragons, they would disappear once they came out the Drag Slayer body, because basically Igneel, like he really couldn't live. But the one thing that I would gotta say about Igneel is that he is very important to the story, and I think that a lot of people, they downplay how his importance is within the story. Like, for example, we know that both Igneel and Zeref were friends back way 400 years ago. And listen, I know I'm not the one to brag a lot, but listen, I gotta say, I called this theory 100% back on my old channel. I can go, if anybody says I'm lying, listen, I will give you the link to that video. I said it, that Igneel and Zeref were friends, that they had some type of connection, because let's be honest, Zeref, he loved Natsu, and once we found out that Natsu and them were like 400 years old, I was thinking to myself, okay, there's no way that Zeref, he would just throw Natsu into the forest with some random dragon and just be like, all right, bye-bye, I'll come back in 400 years. Like, no, I knew he couldn't do that. So we know that Zeref, he basically befriended Igneel, and that was basically the start of the little mini friendship 400 years ago. And when this was finally revealed, you can bet that I was going crazy. Like, a lot of people, they love the little reaction that I did when I found out that Igneel and Zeref were friends. So yeah, we know that they met 400 years ago when they're basically trying to devise the plan how to defeat Acnologia, and the whole celestial spirits and all that stuff. So Igneel and Zeref, we know that they had a big connection together. Now, fast forward up until, I want to say, the current time, not the current time, but real time, because Igneel, we didn't see him a lot, but when we did see him, there were major moments. And the first time that we really got to like see him, besides like Natsu talking about him, was in the Tower of Heaven arc. And listen, to this day, this is still one of my favorite moments of foreshadowing fairy tale. Like, this is just so fire, no pun intended. But basically, when we saw like Neil inside that little volcanic, like the little volcano, we don't know where he was at first. Like, he was basically surrounded like around a whole bunch of fire and lava. He was just chilling there, and then we see the little fairy. Like, it looked like, I'm not gonna lie, it looked like the fairy from Legend of Zelda. I forgot what the fairy's name was, but nonetheless, we see the little glowing light come, and we found out that was Grandini. She was talking to Igneel. She was basically saying stuff like, oh, he acts just like you, and that that Natsu and Wendy were going to meet soon. And then come to find out, that little volcanic place was actually him inside of Natsu. And when she said that they were going to meet soon, she was foreshadowing the whole Orasian Seiya arc. And I was like, yo, this is just so fire foreshadowing. Like, this was just, let's clap it up for Hero Watcher. That's one of my favorite moments of foreshadowing, regardless. Like, that was just so dope, him throw that in there. But we also see a little bit of Igneel's personality. We saw that he got very like angry with Grandine when she was saying stuff like, oh, he acts just like you both get hot-headed. And then we saw Igneel basically like, I'm the king of dragons and all that stuff. So that was interesting seeing Igneel, because that was really the first time that we saw some of his personality. Then the next time that we saw him in real time was for a short moment, but it was in the Racing Seiya's arc. And basically at that point, Natsu, he was going up against Zero, and he was getting demolished. Let's be honest, like, he was just getting beat down. There was no way that Natsu, like, he was done. He saw all his friends at Fairy Tail get beat down. Like, he lost all motivation until we saw Igneel lift him back up. We saw little flashbacks of Natsu getting trained by Igneel, and this was like, oh shit, like, dope. This was dope because now we had Igneel was actually encouraging Natsu because I'm gonna be honest, that brain moment was probably or the zero moment, brain zero, same thing to be honest, but the zero moment that was one of Natsu's biggest experiences with death. Like that was one of the biggest times that Natsu was really gonna die. Like you can tell that was because Igneel had to step in and had to give him motivation to keep on moving. Because I'm not gonna lie, that zero fight it wasn't looking too good for them. So yeah, when Neil had to step in, that's also another time we saw him, and I was like, damn, like this, that's how you tell it's getting real. Then we saw Neil actually discuss how, like, him training Natsu and all that. So yeah, the Orisian Sei's arc, that's when Neil actually did show up and gave him a little bit of encouragement. And then another one is in the Grand Magic Games. And this one is a little slight moment, but we see Igneel. He's basically discussing the potential within Sting and Rogue. He's basically like Igneel's basically saying, "Yo, those two Dragon Slayers that Skydream and White Slogia train. I know I might have butchered Sting and Rogue's dragon name, but you guys know who I mean. But Igneel's basically like, yo, you two, y'all might have trained some potential monsters because let's be honest, a third generation Dragon Slayer, me personally, I think they might have the most potential. Like because they have the Lacrima placed inside them and they have training from an actual dragon. Like that's just stacked on top of stack. So the and they can use Dragon Force and all that stuff. So I'm like, yo, that's just way too OP. But speaking of the Grand Magic game, just a little bit off topic, but I hope we do get to see a little arc of how Igneel became the King of Dragons because, like, I want to see how Acnologia took the throne from him. Now, I know a lot of people they get mixed up saying that he wasn't the King of Dragons, he was just the King of Fire Dragons. But if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure they said that Igneel was like the King of Dragons overall. Then once Acnologia took his spot, he became like the King of Fire Dragons. So I want to see something revolving around that. I think that'll be dope. And then last but not least, Igneel made his final appearance in the Tartaros arc, or it was actually like his first and final appearance because that was our first time that we saw him like real time actually come out and actually like do something. We remember the whole little bet that he made with Natsu. And he was like, "Yo, if you can get that book from, or if you could get the book of E&D, I'll tell you everything." And we saw that Natsu held up his part of the end, like he had the book, but yo, Neil, he couldn't hold up his part of the end. We saw his fight with Acnologia, and I'm gonna be honest, Igneel did good for somebody who wasn't at 100%. He took off half his arm. I mean, even Igneel, like, this was one of the funniest moments of Fairy Tail when Acnologia was like, "Whoa, is that all you got?" And he's like, "Let's relax. Don't forget that I haven't even been alive and that I'm only at like half of my strength." So that was actually a funny moment, but we know that Igneel ended up taking the L to Acnologia, and that was basically the moment where Igneel died, and that was one of the most like shocking, saddest, brutal moment because like Natsu saw Igneel die right in front of him. I was like, damn, like I just that's the moment I actually felt bad for Natsu. I'm gonna be honest, that was like the closest moment that Fairy Tail came like when I almost shed a tear. I didn't quite shed a tear, but I almost shed a tear, like just out of sadness, just because Natsu seen his dad die, he was crying and everything. So yeah, that was basically Igneel's moment where he died. Now, like I said before, let's take away the whole stigma about how Acnologia basically took the souls of the dragons past, or took the souls of all the dragons in the past 400 years ago, and let's say, okay, what if Igneel did come out, and what if he actually didn't die? Now, for starters, if Igneel didn't die, I don't think he would have defeated Acnologia. Now, let me tell you why. Agnologia, I think their fight would have went the same way, but maybe this time maybe Agnologia would have taken away Igneel's arm or something. You know, maybe they would have traded arm for arm, but if Igneel doesn't like if Igneel was at 100%, that's what I'm trying to say. I don't think he would defeat Logie. I think he will be able to hold him off, but he would still end up taking substantial injuries. Now, we saw the whole like moment where the dragons when they were talking to the Dragon Slayers, like when Grandini was talking to Wendy, and we saw Metallicana talking to Gagio and all that stuff. I think that all the dragons they would have spent a little bit of time with their dragon slayers and that they would have like told them the stuff. Maybe, and this is when it gets a little bit interesting because maybe Igneel would have told Natsu that he's E and D right then and there, like in the Tardos arc, and maybe Natsu would have been forced to keep it to himself. I think that would be cool if they had a little play on that, because it'll kind of be like Natsu having to keep it away from everybody, and he wouldn't be in denial when Zeref told him. Granted, it would take away some of the shock factor, because like that was one of the biggest shocking moments when Natsu found out that he was E&D. But I think it will have an interesting turn if Igneel told him right then and there. Now, I do think that the dragons, they would have found some way to basically go off and like live away from humans, because dragons have been extinct for like forever. So I'm pretty sure that they want to come back into society. So I'm pretty sure that the dragons, they would have went off and probably did something on their own. Now, when it comes to that time skip, I actually do think that Natsu, he would have trained with Igneel over the time skip, because we can. This is where it gets a little bit iffy, because we know that Natsu, he met Gildars over the time skip, but we don't know what they did. Like, we don't know how long they were together. We don't know if he was with them for the whole time skip, but we do know that they did spend some time together. So that's a little bit of iffy part. Granted, I do think that he could have still trained with Gildars, but just imagine his training with Gildars adding on to his training with Igneel. I think he would have came back stronger than ever. And for example, modes like Blaze Dragon King mode, I think that he would have been able to like get a whole new different transformation. I just think it'll be way stronger and everything. So yeah, if Natsu actually did, or if Igneel was actually alive, I think that he would have trained with them over the 1 year time skip. Now, in the Avatar arc, this is going to be a little bit of a spoiler, but if you're an anime only, you can mute the video. But in the Avatar arc, I don't think that Igneel would have had a big role, because that arc was pretty short, and I doubt that Igneel would have came out for like anything during the arc, because Fairy Tail, they handled it pretty well, if I do say so myself. So the Avatar arc, it would have been, it would have been the same to me, to be honest. And then last but not least, we have the Alvarez Empire arc. And this one, it gets spunko, because me personally, I believe that Igneel, he would have had a huge role in this arc. Now, one of the biggest things is the Natsu and Zera fight. If Igneel was alive, I do think that him and Zeref would have had an encounter, and it would have made for one of the greatest moments of Fairy Tail. Like, just imagine an alive Igneel and a Zeref just talking together. I think that this would have forced Hiro Mashima to write a little bit of more depth into the relationship, because as far as we know that they're just like friends, or or acquaintances. I'm gonna be honest, saying that they're friends is even, it's not a stretch, but that's kind of like a, it's a little bit of a stretch, I'll be honest. But I think that it would have forced Hiro Mashima to write more depth with their friendship. Maybe he could have like written something about how Igneel, like, I don't want to say like how he did something slick to Natsu, but maybe Igneel, that sounded really bad. Like, I'm not saying Igneel did something to Natsu as a kid. No, I'm not saying that, but you guys know what I mean. Maybe he could have had a little bit more story written behind Igneel and Zera's backstory. And I do think that Igneel, he might have interfered back when we got introduced to all the Spring and 12 members, because I'm gonna be honest, the Spring and 12 members, they've all been defeated through teamwork, and maybe Neil could have fought in some of them. Maybe like God Serena, that would have forced him to go all out. And then one of the interesting things would be Acnologia's return. Now, had Acnologia returned, I don't think that he would have fought Igneel right then and there, because he was more focused on God Serena. But if they did end up fighting, I do think that that's where Igneel would have got died. But we know that Igneel, he is dead. So basically, we know that none of this stuff could happen, and it will all be pointless. Comment what you guys think down below. Subscribe if you haven't. Peace out.